Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's guest is the founder, CEO of Creating New Steps, wellness coach, and licensed therapist, Jodi Tingling. Welcome, Jodi. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and energy to have an interview with me on a Saturday evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this interview together. And yeah, it should be a good one, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Yeah,
today we're talking about like a very important topic, which is how our workplace environment can affect our wellness and
for
what we
sure.
can do to improve our wellness.
Yeah, very
Mhm.
important topic. And I think it has definitely been top of mind for a lot of folks, especially post pandemic. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, happy to talk about that and get into it. Yeah.
Awesome. So, could you tell us a bit more about yourself, your mission, how creating new steps was created, and how it has evolved over time?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I think a little bit more about myself. I think you mentioned that in the intro. I'm a wellness coach
Mhm.
as well as a licensed therapist.
Mhm.
My passion is really wellness, helping people thrive, and
Mhm.
really helping people live their best life. And I think for me, in terms of even like a bit about my career trajectory, I've always sort of been in sort of that helping capacity. And, even from the very beginning, I started in doing a bit of like youth leadership work and to moving on to sort of like the YMCA where Jane and I
Mhm.
know each other,
Yeah, yeah.
where I was doing sort of like that employment consulting and really helping to empower folks to be able to, get into their career or their chosen job field
Mhm.
that they wanted to. And, for me, I just wanted to continue to along that line of helping folks. And,
Mhm.
why I kind of chose, really helping people is, early on in my career, I wish that I would have had, a lot of the stepping stools and a lot of the help that I sort of now sort of give back to others. And so it was just really important for me to kind of like
Mhm.
pay it forward, to be in a career, and I feel so also privileged to be able to help to empower folks and really getting into wellness. So many people are suffering. So many people are, experiencing, things like depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
burnout,
Mhm.
trauma. There's so many things, heavy, heavy things on
Yeah.
people's plates. And
Mhm.
so, with my company creating new steps, I kind of
Mhm.
started out more as sort of helping people through their career trajectory. And then that kind of transformed into doing more of that work of helping people really unpack some of their experiences and some of the blocks that kind of prevent
Mhm.
them from really getting into their career. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I just really wanted to do more of that deeper, meaningful work because what I was really finding, and I'm sure you kind of had that experience too when you were doing some of that client work, is that when we're sort of helping to meet a certain, we're helping them to meet a certain goal, which is like helping them in their career, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not really at that state where you are ready to kind of pursue some of these things, and
Mhm.
you're sort of having these sort of like roadblocks, if you will, for example, you're experiencing some mental health challenges, then it can
Mhm.
be extremely difficult to really meet sort of that goal that you have out for yourself. So you kind of have to tackle what's underneath the surface
Mhm.
first to
Yeah.
be able to get to that next level. And so, now with my organization, creating new steps, what we're really focused on is sort of that wellness coaching piece. And it's sort of two tiered. So I work with the individuals who want to live more intentionally, and my goal is to help them to live more intentionally, right? However that may look for them, because I say, your own wellness journey is yours, and yours to sort of discover and figure out. And so I help individuals on that front in terms of helping them to create more of an intentional pathway in their lives, and then also working with organizations
Mhm.
to really disrupt sort of like the status quo, going into organizations and kind of taking a look at what they're doing to help their employees thrive in the
Mhm.
workplace, right? And it does have to incorporate some amount of wellness and really caring about their people,
Yeah.
to be able to help your people thrive. And so that's in part what I do, and then what I'm really really passionate about. And
Mhm.
really, this journey is about helping others and helping to create that impact, and
Mhm.
continuing to, yeah, disrupt that status quo, because wellness has to be at the forefront of everything. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tony Robbins also said if you want to achieve something, 70% or 80% is psychology. Once you get your psychology right, you get everything else right as well. And our
exactly.
psychology is connected with our physiology as well. And I think you being a therapist, you have a really profound understanding of that. That can be really, really helpful for your clients. Because
Yeah.
to unpacking some of the stuff, you need to have really in-depth knowledge and skills to uncover some of the very sensitive and maybe like raw emotions and some sensitive issues, right?
100%. Yes,
Mhm.
definitely.
Right. And I know that
Yeah.
you have your website and you developed a stress relief toolkit. We'll
Yeah.
get to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I looked through it. I pretty like it because you
Yeah.
help people discover what's short term and stretch goals, and you also provide a community for them. So, but before that, okay, could you elaborate on what wellness means to you?
Yeah, that's such a great question.
Mhm.
And I think for myself, it really means kind of going back to that intentionality, right? It's about having, intentionality in your life, right? So a lot of the times, people kind of go through life, and it's like it just feels like things are just happening to them. Things are just happening, right? And so it's sort of like flipping that and being more proactive to say, no, I'm taking charge of my life. And, this is what I'm going to do in terms of this is what I want to plan for my life. Right. And so when it comes to wellness, it's about really, one kind of going into, those deeper layers that you sort of mentioned, and getting into sort of that healing journey, right? We all sort of
Mhm.
come with sort of like past traumas that we kind of have to work through to be able to eventually be at that place where we are well and we are thriving. And so when it comes to wellness, it's about that intentionality for me, right? It's about really creating that space for yourself and knowing that, yeah, it really needs to be one of those top priority things, right? It's about having, that self awareness, knowing what your triggers are, right? Knowing, when you are in a challenging space and how to navigate through that, right? It's also knowing, your needs, anticipating your needs, right? We all kind of get into that period where, we get extremely busy, work happens, we're going through the motions, work gets busy. But when we kind of put that intentionality into play, that's when it's like, okay, well, for moments when it is busy, I have a plan for myself. And this is something I talk about in the stress relief toolkit is having that intentionality and having a plan set up for yourself, so that you're not just experiencing life as is and you're just taking things like that just come at you. It's, kind of knowing your own world and anticipating those needs and anticipating those challenging times, so that you do have like a plan in place. So, you're able to navigate through those times a lot more effectively
Mhm.
Versus if you're just sort of experiencing, life as it comes, then
Mhm.
it's like it's much more likely that it can
Mhm.
lead to, states of anxiety, stress, burnout, and all the things that we don't want in our life. And so, yeah, it's like flipping it back again. It's like that intentionality piece. It's so, 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 so important when we talk about, having that wellness journey. So if a message kind of comes through today, it's like setting that intention for your life when it comes to wellness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think having that intention also takes people out of the victim mentality. Not like things
Yes.
happening to me, but I actually have the power to make changes. And sometimes
Yes.
our brain, our mind makes things more difficult for ourselves, creating
Yeah. Oh,
imaginary
yeah.
scenarios scaring us.
Yeah.
But I think your stress relief toolkit, like, it can be a very helpful tool. Okay, so here is what you go to when
Mhm.
you log in. So basically, you have a lot of videos that
Yeah.
you can watch. And do you recommend like go to like all trainings? Like
Yeah,
what do you think
just
is
head over to all trainings. You'll be able to see
yeah.
some of the trainings that are released. So the way I set it up, it's a 4 part, I guess, course series. So we have one on, sort of the general stress reduction. I have one on how you can create work life balance. I have one on creating habits
Mhm,
to really manage your stress. And then lastly, I have, a lot of evidence based strategies that you can implement in your life day to day, right? So these sort of tools is something that, they are evidence based. And it's actually something I use when I am with my therapy clients as well, a lot of these tools. And it helps you really maintain your wellness journey and really be proactive about it, right? Because
yeah,
some of these strategies are pretty intuitive, right? Like if we're feeling stressed out, it's like, we need to incorporate some of those wellness moments, whether it's, you're doing a bit of meditation, whether it's moving your body, whether it's, talking to a friend.
yeah,
But sometimes it's good to kind of have like a reminder. And in the toolkit, I really kind of focus on creating your own wellness plan. And so it's about creating that journey for yourself, kind of
mhm,
figuring out what works for you and continuing on that momentum,
okay.
right? Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So how about like my courses? So basic, do you have just one course now, or you're going to have more courses in the future?
That's
Uh,
the hope to have some more courses in the future, but I
yeah.
think for now I'm really focused on
Mhm,
this toolkit, stress relief toolkit, and
mhm,
it's especially geared towards, I would say, the high performers, and I'll lump myself in there because I'm definitely a high performer as well. High performers, I find need even more reminders
mhm.
to really take care of their self and to have sort of like a
Absolutely.
wellness plan in place. So
Yeah.
this is what I'm focused on for now, and I'm hoping that it will be able to make some impact for a lot of folks that are out there that need the tools, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I called it a toolkit, right? It's something that you have in your tool belt, and it something you can easily just kind of like pull out and use. So
Mhm.
yeah,
I really like this idea. And you also have community forum, which is something I really like. Uh, it's
yes.
bringing people together. I think it can be really powerful
Hmm.
to know that we're not alone. We're all on this human journey trying to figure things out, and it's okay to
Yeah.
not being 100% all the time, right?
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to incorporate, having a community element in it, because a lot of the times when, we're going through these mental health challenges, we feel like very isolated. We feel like we're alone. We feel like, okay, like, am I the only person that's going through this? Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like mental health is very much on a continuum, right? You have, sort of like you're in the healthy zone, to like, severely mentally impacted, right? And there's a lot of gray in between, right? Depending on our given state.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's just really, really important to continue to maintain that journey, right? And it serves as a reminder. And, if you're sort of in that state where it's like, okay, I'm super stressed out, you can like literally go back to the toolkit and just be like, okay, like, what can I pull from here that I can use in this moment, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. What I really like about it is that it helps us build habits because we are
yes,
creatures of habits. Once
yes,
we get used to something and then we start doing it for like 28, 30 days, we start to incorporate it more and more into our lives. And I think
yeah,
by using your toolkit, we can really deepening our experience with ourselves too, by better understanding ourselves and what our needs are, and
yeah,
having a
for sure.
community like that. That's for sure really, really good.
Yeah. And that self-awareness is really key as well too. And I would say like this is a toolkit even for folks who, are not quite ready or, to go see like a therapist or a mental health profession. This could be something to get you started. And or if you have sort of sought out a therapist,
Mhm.
this can be something that is sort of like a post-therapeutic journey as well
Mhm.
too, because a lot of the tools I'm sure, therapists have probably brought up in a session. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
right. And also, I think therapist is there to help us build good relationship with ourselves, and
for sure.
therapists cannot really do everything for us.
Yeah.
So it's very important for us to set aside time uh, to really listen to ourselves, and that's a way to show ourselves love, right? And,
Yes.
to listen to ourselves and value our thoughts, no
Yes.
matter how ridiculous we think they are, is to develop this unconditional acceptance and compassion for ourselves. And I think your toolkit can be a really good, like a homework for
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, I won't call it homework because a lot of people are scared about that. But yeah, like it's really, tools and things to pull from, act as a reminder, to continue to help. Because yeah, as long as you're alive, you're gonna be going through that mental health continuum, right? And it's important to both be proactive as well as use the strategies that work when you have a time of need. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's really my hope for this toolkit, and I hope folks find it valuable.
yeah. Thanks. And I think there's so much distractions nowadays, right? It just really pull our attention and energy from focusing ourselves. And I think your
Yeah,
toolkit can really uh, help us learn to give energy and time back to ourselves that we need. Um,
for
and
sure.
I really like when you talk about wellness as a continuum, because for people who are
Yeah,
perfectionists, may think they need to feel good at all times, but
no,
it's not. Uh,
not realistic at all.
it's not realistic. Could you talk about like, why this kind of expectation is not realistic, and what negative impact it can have on people who have this type of mentality or expectation of themselves?
Yeah, I think, sometimes it can be sort of a condition of our learning, right? For some of us, it's like we kind of been led to that state of, we need to be perfect, perfectionism, especially amongst, unfortunately, the high achievers, right? And so it's really important that we understand that yeah, life is not black or white, good or bad. There is a lot of gray in between area, right? We
Mhm.
cannot feel good 100% of the time. That's just not realistic. And so, again, it's kind of going back to that, having that level of self awareness, right? If we're sort of feeling that sense of perfectionism, we have to show up and we always have to present our best.
Mhm.
That's definitely something that's worthwhile unpacking because
Mhm.
we can't always be our best. We can't always be, quote unquote perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as perfect. And I think especially for women of color. We kind of go through this so-called, sort of imposter syndrome sometimes. And it's really a function of our society and the way that we are raised, right? I actually kind of just had this conversation with someone the other day, and I was kind of telling them, like, it's not really imposter syndrome. It's just that
Mhm.
you didn't really give yourself the space to learn, the space to grow, right? And that's an
Mhm.
important part of anybody who is sort of like getting into a new career, who's in their present career and is feeling like, oh, okay, like I don't know all the things, right? You're not meant to know all the things. You're
Yeah.
not meant to know all the things, right? And if you know all the things, then you're probably not in a great state to be like any sort of leader, because like anybody that is a leader is constantly learning, constantly growing,
Mhm.
constantly doing professional development activities, right? Like the world is changing. Like look at what we have now. We have AI, we have ChatGPT,
Yeah.
we have so many things that's constantly being in innovation. And so to feel like we're like on top of everything, no, it's just not going to happen. The world is moving at a pace that it's like it's unsustainable to really catch up to that. So again, it's sort of going back to sort of that level of self-awareness, right? And and trying to unpack, okay, why do I have this sort of perfectionist sort of ideal? Like, is this perfectionist ideal benefiting me at this moment, right?
Mhm.
And so it's starting to really unpack some of those ideologies that we've sort of been, raised with, and maybe like society as well has sort of had on us. And again, as women of color, it's like, kind of like those unrealistic expectations. Like I don't know about you, Jane, but like, even growing up, I was always taught like I have to be the best at everything. I have to be better than everyone because I am a woman of color. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of dispelling some of those myths. Like we are human, right? We are human. We're going to make mistakes. We're gonna learn from those mistakes. We're gonna grow. It's all gonna be okay. And so yeah, it's really unpacking some of those ideologies is really, really important and detrimental to our health and well-being.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, well said. And I think one of the things we need to learn in our healing and growing journey is becoming more tolerant of our humanness, making mistakes fine,
Yes.
as long as we have the intention to become better. And I
Yes.
think it's usually the people who are really good, who are so kind hearted, they are the most hardest on themselves.
Yes.
And those
Yes.
who are not really have the awareness to improve themselves, they always think they're the best.
Right. And like you don't want to be in that space where like you're just
Yeah,
thinking you're the best, right? And
yeah,
so, sometimes it could be a good sign that you have this quote unquote imposter syndrome, because you're still growing, you're still learning, that there's still lots to for you to grow and develop, right? And so it's even having that reframe to really help through some of those ideals that aren't really beneficial to anybody, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like fine line between humility and maybe self-defeating ideas and
Yeah.
thoughts. Um, and speaking of that, um, do you think humility is a good trait for a good leader? And could you talk about why a good leader is so important for the survival and the thriving of an organization?
Yeah, I think, wanted to even talk about like the opposite, right? Like having a bad leader like can really be detrimental to our careers, right? Like
Yeah.
many of us have had
Oh,
like these quote unquote like toxic leaders.
yes.
And it's like, coming out of that, it's sort of like a traumatic experience. And
Mhm.
so, when you have it on like the flip side and you have a leader that sees you, you have a leader that, hears you, you have a leader that is actually supportive of you, it
Mhm.
really does make a difference in your career. It makes a difference in your well being. It makes a difference in really how you show up every single day. And so, it's sort of kind of getting back to that point of, somebody that feeling like they know it all versus somebody that's continually learning and growing, right? As a leader, you have to be continually learning and growing and have to be kind of like constantly thinking about ways to better yourself,
Mhm.
ways to empower your team, ways to be more supportive, right? Ways to even just like apologize if you sort of offended somebody or did something wrong, right? Because like you're human, you're not going to get everything right. And so yeah, it really makes an impact with people and organizations, right? And like most people, I'm sure you've seen like the research as well too that says like most people leave bad leaders, not necessarily the
Yeah.
organization, right? And
Yes.
so that speaks a lot to um, the type of leader, the type of impact the leader has on their team. So yeah, it is definitely very important for leaders to have that humility and that quest for knowledge and growth and quest to really empower their team. And you really need to like people to be able to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
It sounds funny when you say it that like you need to like people, but I think what happens a lot of the times is that somebody that's really great and has like specialized knowledge or subject matter expertise in a certain area, oftentimes they will get promoted to be a leader or a people manager, and they're not necessarily ready for that in terms of the people management skills. It's like, yes, you
Absolutely.
can be very good at your job, but a major part of leadership is people management, is dealing with people, dealing with their
Mhm.
different personalities, their traits, and understanding how mental health impacts the workplace as well too. And so sometimes that's kind of what happens when
Yeah.
some folks are sort of promoted to leadership when they're not necessarily sort of ready, or maybe the organization doesn't have like the specific like trainings to kind of help support their leader. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it can be very challenging for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a quote I really like. It says, "You can only meet other people as deeply as you meet yourself."
Yes.
So people who are not good manager of people, they usually are not good manager of their own emotions. They can bring
Mm,
their own issues in their private life into their workplace because they get triggered very easily.
yeah.
And again, that goes back to why people who enjoys learning, they will always keep on learning, because
Yeah.
there's the day we finish learning everything is the day we leave from like esoteric standpoint. Like we
Yeah.
finish all the karma in this lifetime is when
Yeah.
we leave our leave this earth plane. And when it comes to managing your own emotions, you really have to learn and be willing to be vulnerable with yourself. Because if you're not even willing to be vulnerable with yourself, then you cannot be vulnerable with other people. And initially, you may be able to put up a mask, but when challenging situations happen, or when you see some traits in another person that you don't like in yourself, you can get very triggered, right? You can get very
For sure.
upset, or you can feel intolerable to be around people. And that's why it's so important for managers to develop themselves. And the
Yes.
more we learn about ourselves, the more we want to learn, because we have infinite potential. And that's why, going back to what you're saying, good leaders never feel they know it all. Actually, the more we know, the more we feel like we don't know, and the more we
Right.
want to know. And that being in that state, that put us in a place of humility and be compassionate towards ourselves and people around us too. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it's all of those things. Again, it's like getting back to that self-awareness piece,
Yes.
right? Like if you are not aware of who you are, your triggers, what sort of motivates you, all of that stuff, is something that, a good leader will definitely have to take into account. So, yeah.
Could you talk about some of the negative or toxic traits a leader has? Because I feel like some people can be very tolerant towards others, or they're not recognizing the toxic traits people in leadership positions have?
I think, for most people, you kind of know, or I think you kind of know, if a leader isn't being that great of a leader, right? It's sort of like you kind of feel it intuitively in your body, right? Like whether the leader is just being very critical, whether the leader is constantly requiring you to work like, outside of your work hours, like it's a consistent pattern, kind of ranging from more of like the abusive behavior, sort of like yelling and like, talking negatively about you. And it can also lead to kind of like also be like microaggressions that are happening. Like they're small, but like it really makes you feel not that great, right? And so I think most people really intuitively know when the leader isn't really a great leader.
Mhm.
There are some ways to sort of kind of work around it. I would say in general, one of the things that I really talk about in the stress relief toolkit is how to manage that work stress and how to even work with your leader. And there's a term called managing up, right? And that's really about communicating with your leader at the level that they want to be communicated at. It's about sort of like getting across your wants and needs as well too. And really it's about ensuring that you're when you're kind of communicating with your leader, that you're not just bringing them problems, but you're also bringing them the solutions and your recommendations, right? So it's more of a sort of like a proactive approach to working with your leadership team, right? And I would say, both for if you are sort of experiencing that toxicity at work, and or maybe you don't feel like it's toxic, but you would like more effective ways to talk to your leader, I would say managing up is something to really look into and really hone in on, because it gives you sort of a sense of empowerment as well too when you're sort of taking charge of your career, right? Kind of getting back to the, you don't want to let things happen to us, you don't want to let that negativity get to you. So this is sort of a way that you can kind of work around that and understand, how to effectively have that two-way conversation with your leader. So things to really consider as sort of like navigating the workplace, because it can be quite tricky. And not every leader is the same, but if you're able to have some of the tools to help you navigate some of those more challenging communication styles and leaders.
Yeah.
I would say, use that to your advantage, right? So use it to your advantage, and know that, you don't need to let things just happen to you, but you can take charge of things as well at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say if an employee has a toxic leader and communication with them is just really tricky. The leader is selfish, manipulative, and not speaking the truth. Do you recommend the employee to speak to HR?
I would say always protect yourself, always
Mhm.
document. Yeah, I would say, if there's sort of like a manipulation sort of tactic, always sort of going back to documenting what happened. If you had a meeting with a leader, and it didn't go so well, documenting what happened. And then even just sending it back to the leader in terms of like their expectation. This is what I got out of the meeting, and like have a bulleted point list, and then confirming that, right, to the leader. So again, kind of taking that proactivity back in your court. I would also say, nobody has to put up with abuse. So if this is something that is ongoing, I would say, maybe seek out an employment lawyer, speak to somebody, maybe that can give you some sound advice on how to deal with that. If you have an employee assistant program, a lot of the times, they can help you sort of navigate through some of those tricky moments.
Mhm.
But in terms of going to HR, I'm kind of on the fence with that. So,
Maybe not. Okay.
too, because you still have to work at that workplace. And so that's why I say seek out external support, whether through your employee assistance program, because with your employee assistant program, they don't confide that information to the employer. So if you have that, you're able to get also like some legal advice or maybe an employment lawyer that can help support in that way. I would say go that route before, kind of considering the alternative.
Okay, I see. But like
Yeah.
technically, is it HR's job to make sure employees are happy in their job?
It's HR's job to protect the company. I'll say that. That's what I'll say about that. It's HR's job to protect the company. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So Jody, we talked a bit previously about high achievers and how they tend to neglect their wellness. And could you talk
Yeah.
about from like your experience? Uh, do you see a pattern in high achievers? Is there like something particular they tend to neglect?
Yes, for sure. There's definitely a pattern in high achievers, and these are the type of clients I will frequently meet with over and over again. Um, High achievers definitely really are concentrated on doing well at work, making sure that others know that they're on top of it. They will do long hours at extended periods of times, and what tends to happen is that, they are the likely group that will sort of suffer from, stress and burnout. Right. And so, I wish there were some stats on this, and maybe there are, but you'll tend to see a lot of the times, the ones that tend to take like a stress leave are the ones that are the high achievers and the ones that really don't know when to stop, right? So, a high achiever is called a high achiever because, like they have that energy, that drive, that motivation to kind of like continue going. Um, but it's hard because it's like, don't know when to stop, right? Or put that balance in place. So, yeah, like what tends to happen is that, yeah, they end up burning out, or they end up coming to see people like myself and, kind of wondering why they're experiencing some of the symptomology of it, right? And so they can kind of come in and say like they're, constantly thinking, they're wired, they can't sleep, they, are getting extremely negative, they can't focus. There's so many different symptomologies that's sort of in there, and some of the times they will end up, their body will like end up giving out and end up being like sick in some form of capacity, right? And I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and yeah, I was kind of just explaining to them how things sometimes happen when we're at that really high elevated levels of stress. It's, either you have to stop going at the pace at which you're going, or your body will, right? Like there's no doubts about it. Our bodies and our minds aren't meant to be operating at 100% capacity all the time. So yeah, that really tends to be the pattern. It's like, there really isn't a problem like going until there is one, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I kind of work with high achievers to really help them understand their own patterns, as well as, helping, again, kind of unpacking some of those beliefs that we kind of have of like, that perfectionism and wanting to show people at our best, and wanting to be sort of have that expectation that they're always like, like the go-to person, but like what is usually lacking are those real boundaries in place, for when you need to have those boundaries of like the cutoff time for work, for example, right? Um, so yeah, it can be really tricky, but it's really again, kind of going back to unpacking like what is happening in their world where they feel like they need to continue like going. Like, I don't know if you remember that old like Energizer Bunny commercial where it's like, the Energizer Bunny like keeps going. And then like, yeah, it just never stops. So yeah, with high achievers, it's really hard, I would say, and usually they come to see me at, when they're at like that worst point where it's like something needs to change, otherwise, something will happen. So yeah,
So would you say like they have trouble saying no to people?
oh, 100% have trouble saying no to people. They tend to be, and I won't lump everybody in, but
Yeah.
a lot of the times, yeah, like it's a, wanting to be a very agreeable person, wanting to help others, but it's often at the detriment of themselves, and it's often at the detriment of not having good boundaries in place, and even sort of like that art of delegation. Right?
Mhm.
If somebody's sort of like giving you something that's out of scope, it's even learning to delegate and say like, listen, like this isn't in my scope, but maybe so and so might be able to kind of take it on, right? So
Sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Judging from your description of high achievers, it reminds me of empath. Would you say high achievers, they tend to be very empathetic people?
um yes and no. I would say they're not very empathetic towards themselves.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, they do have, that vision to want to help others. They want to support other people, and but I would say they're kind of lacking a lot of the time. I'm not going to generalize, but a lot of the times they're lacking that empathy towards themselves, which can be the most important thing, right? If we're not empathetic towards ourselves, then we're not going to prioritize ourselves. We're not going to take care of ourselves. We're going to put other people above our own basic needs, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, yes and no.
Yes, no, yeah. So to me, it sounds maybe more like uh, this kind of behavior was shaped maybe by their family or growing up. Would you say it's something in their nature?
It could be a bit of both, but I would say
Okay.
for the most part, definitely conditioning from what I've seen. And
Mhm.
I would also say I'm a self-proclaimed high achiever as well too. And so it's sort of that conditioning of so a lot of us are sort of raised in an environment, especially myself. I'm coming from parents that were immigrants, and it's like you have to be the best. You have to present yourself and like sort of like this like perfectionistic light.
Mhm.
It's not realistic, right? And then it's also society as well too, right? We're in a world that is, honestly, it's really led through the lens of white supremacy. And so if the society is led in through a lens of white supremacy as well as the patriarchy as well too, we're always going to be lesser than, right? Like women of color, that intersectionality, we're always going to be considered lesser than. And so, we have to find a way to sort of compensate. And so that's where sort of that high achiever sort of mentality kind of comes in. It's like we have to compensate. We have to always, look our best, and sometimes it's also, when I do sort of like a comparison of folks that are maybe in similar positions, and it's like, maybe it's like the woman of color like having to like always be that like professional, always present themselves in a kind of perfect light, versus somebody that is not, and they can, like they can make all the jokes, and they can, they're not as high achieving. It does make a huge statement,
Mhm.
right? And so it definitely is, a fraction of our society, as well as how we're raised as well
Mhm.
too,
Yeah,
right? it's
right.
it's very much intertwined into this like capitalistic society that we're in, that really says like you have to prove your worth constantly, right? You always have to be doing something. Your worth is defined by like your career, your worth is defined by your achievements, right? We can't just kind of just be, we have to constantly be achieving, and that is not realistic at all. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do think maybe nowadays the society has already moved forward a lot
Yeah.
because of immigration. People see people from all kinds of culture a lot
Yeah.
more. And I do say like the younger generation, they're a lot more tolerant and open-minded.
Oh,
Um,
I love the Gen Z generation. Like they just give me life. The way that they put those boundaries into place, the way that they call out things.
yeah,
I'm living
absolutely.
for Gen Z.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of information that were not available to older generation now. You
Yes,
can find it easily on
easily.
internet, and you can communicate with people across the world easily through
Yeah.
just typing a button, right? And so I do think we have moved forward quite a bit, but I think there's also a lot that's still kind of ingrained in our mind because we can carry ancestral wounds, like generational wounds. What happened in the past 4 to 6 generation, it can
Yeah.
still affect us. And these kind of things can only be unwrapped during therapy sessions. And you yourself has therapy background and also a wellness coach. I think you can really provide enormous amount of support and insight to your clients and organizations that you work with. Um,
Oh,
and also, I think even though we live in a world that's overall that's still a lot of issues, but there are people who, like yourself, are very aware and live at a higher level of consciousness that really embody this the empathy, compassion, understanding towards others. And so, for people who may be struggling, it's okay and it's important for them to know that not everybody is like their abuser. Not everybody is full of anger or direct their problems at other people. There are people who are really, really compassionate and very well equipped and skilled that can help. So I just want to put the message out there because asking for help it's a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness.
Oh, 100%. I always say,
Mhm.
asking for help is self-love, right? It's taking
Yeah.
care of yourself. It's prioritizing yourself. It's
Mhm.
knowing that, we all need support at one
Absolutely.
time or another, right? And even
Mhm.
therapists have their own therapists, right? Like a part of our journey is that we have to continue to grow and unpack our own trauma and
Mhm.
unpack even triggers that come through working with clients as well
Yeah.
too. And so,
Mhm.
like my hopes is that we continue to normalize mental health supports and destigmatize it, right? Because mental health is health. Mental health is health. And so, everybody really should have that right to support their mental health, right? Just like we go to a doctor, yearly to get that checkup, and we continue to do things to maintain our body. We also have to continue to do things to maintain our mental health, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's called mental health, but I feel like emotions and affect our whole body. So it's not just in the mind; it's in the body
It's
as
in the
well.
body as well. Yeah, that stress response can really be held in your body. The trauma that you experience, it's held in your body as well too. So, like an important thing to kind of highlight as well too. Not all therapy is just like talk therapy, right? There's some therapists that do sort of that somatic work where it's like working with your body and
Yeah.
working with how that trauma might be
Mhm.
stored, right? I know a lot of us really walk around with like a lot of stress and tension in our
Yeah.
bodies, right? Some of us like walk with our shoulders up like this, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, like we need to find a way to release it, right?
Mhm.
There's always different ways and modalities that can be impactful and can be helpful. And you don't have to do it on your own at
Yeah.
all, right?
Yeah.
Even, something basic as having like community support,
Mhm.
taking courses, doing professional development, really continuing to work on yourself and understanding your triggers, and just having that sense of self-awareness. It's so important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yes, we have different types of therapy, like trauma therapy, psychotherapy. There's also like Gestalt therapy.
Yes.
Um, we really live in a society and time that humanity has somewhat developed quite a bit already, and that is really enabled to support our healing journey and uplift the human consciousness to a higher level so more people can embody this sense of compassion, empathy, understanding, and the sense of connectedness with others instead of isolation. And like you said, like we're not supposed to be isolating ourselves. We human are
No.
social beings. We're
Yep.
supposed to connect with others and talk with others. And I think your stress relief kit really address these issues from a multidimensional level. You give them tools. You help them develop connection with themselves and also provide a community for them to talk with like-minded people who are looking for similar things. I think it's really amazing. Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Yeah. I hope that it can be a stepping stool for some folks, because there's really a wide array of even strategies in there that people can pull like one, two things from, and really start to experience the impact from it even right away, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, not everybody has to go through that same, mental health support journey. It can look and feel differently for a lot of folks, right? Some people will, like go to yoga. Some people will like go take walks by the water, and it's like really therapeutic and meditative as well too, right? Some folks, it's like literally picking up the phone and talking to a good friend about what you're experiencing, right? And for other people, it can just be literally feeling the feelings, right? It's okay sometimes to not be okay. Like we don't need to be okay all the times. There are times where it's like, things impact us, and sometimes having like a good cry in the shower, like sometimes that's all we need to like feel better. It's like it's actually scientific. It's a stress relief, right? Like it's a stress relief to like let it all go, let it
Yeah.
out of the body, and just
Yeah.
have that release. So it's like however you want to experience that way to kind of get that stress out of your body, like I
Mhm.
am all for it. It's not going to look the same for everybody, and so
Yeah.
it's just a matter of figuring out like what really works for you. And one of the things I like to ask clients is, what has worked for you in the past, right? Like when you were a kid, when you were younger, what is something that like helped to bring that like joy into your life? What sparks the joy for you, right? And sometimes folks will like have to think back, and they're like, well, I used to do like art. I used to do a bit of dancing. I used to do like, and they come up with all sorts of things. And sometimes it's like going back to the basics, right? It's like, okay, like sometimes it's like, oh yeah, like I used to do like so many different things. Like let me pick
Mhm.
up back that hobby again. Cause as adults, we tend to lose our hobbies and things that helped us to feel good, and sometimes it's literally just going back to the basics and be like, yeah, like this used to make me feel good, like let me try it again and see how I'm feeling. I had a client of mine who said that when she was a teenager she used to do
Mhm.
ballet,
Yeah.
and throughout our experience she was like, guess what, Jody, I just signed up for an adult ballet class. And I was like, yes, fantastic, that's amazing. Right? So it's like
Yeah.
getting back to those things that really spark the joy in us. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's really a process of like reflecting on that and getting back to those things. So
Yeah. This reminds me of inner child healing, and inner
yes,
child healing is a very important
yes,
part of healing journey.
yeah,
I would like to invite you back in the future to talk more about your
Sure.
stress relief toolkit because I think it's such a
Yeah.
well put together program. But just for today, any closing comments for wellness and any
Yeah.
suggestions and advice for people to improve their wellness level?
Yeah, I think, the thing I want to leave with is embed wellness in your design, right? That really means, really prioritizing yourself, prioritizing wellness, right? We all sort of go through sort of like these systems, these routines that we do, these habits that we sort of take up, embed wellness in it, embed wellness in the design, right?
Mhm.
A lot of us can, sometimes we're like on all day for work. We're like on all day from like 9 to 5. It's like, no, embed it in design. Whether you have to, schedule it in your calendar, whether you have to have like an app to remind you to do certain things, apps that like remind you to drink water, right? Apps that remind you to take a break, whatever, right? Embed it in the design and really do what works for you. And I would say, when you're embedding wellness into design, make sure you have some strong boundaries around
Mhm.
that, right?
Yes.
So, if you are someone that likes to schedule things in your calendar and, people tend to sometimes like schedule over, it's like, nope, put those boundaries in place and say, actually, I'm not available at that time.
Mhm.
Can we do another time? Right. So having those strong boundaries in place when it comes to your wellness and really having a plan. Like, and that's what I mean when I say having it in the design. You need to have a plan to kind of move forward, right? You can't just say, okay, well, I'm gonna make my best effort to take a walk tomorrow. It's like, no, plan it in your design, right? Have a plan in place. And, something that I talk about in the stress relief toolkit is to especially have a plan when you know you're going to have challenging times, right? I think a lot of people plan for the times where they have high motivation, their energy levels at the peak, they're ready to go. But, what are you going to do when you are not feeling it? You would rather just curl up on the couch, you'd rather just, sit there all day and zone out. No, you have to have a plan in place for those,
Mhm.
especially for those challenging times where your motivation level is low. Otherwise, it's not going to get done, right? So
Yeah.
having a plan and following through. And yeah, in the stress relief toolkit, talk all about how to create habits that stick. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well said. Yes. We can always rely on our motivation because
No,
it's just not enough. We really
not
have
enough.
to put us create a design and embed it in our habits, and then it becomes something just habitual to us and become part of our subconscious programming,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Mhm.
like you get up every day, you brush your teeth, you
Mhm.
need to embed that into the design, right? So whether like maybe it's even just finding one thing you can do per day, right? Whether it's, going outside for a walk, whether it's journaling for 5 minutes, whether it's doing a bit
Mhm.
of a meditation, connecting with a friend, find one thing that you can do,
Mhm.
and, have it in your design, right? Otherwise, yeah, if it's not planned, it's not gonna get done. So yeah, I would leave people with that. Have it in your design, and and that is especially more important when you aren't feeling those motivation levels. It's you have your plan in place, and just like you do certain things, like you still have to take yourself to work when it's raining outside, right? So it's having that in the design that you follow through on the plan even when you're not feeling at your best, because what you'll find is that after you've completed that, you will feel so much better. It's one of those things, right? You have to plan it out and execute it, and it will help you feel better. And just knowing that in your mind as well
Yeah.
too, like, yes, this will help me feel better. I know that, so I'm gonna do it.
Absolutely. And one thing I would like to add is consistent incremental changes makes
Yes,
bigger impact than taking a huge step and
100%.
shock
Yeah.
your body and your system and then take like two step back.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I talk about that as well too in the toolkit. It's,
Mhm.
if finding something small you can
Mhm.
do, right? So even if it's like you do like a meditation for like 1 minute, right? Like you have a transition between a meeting, you do something in like 1 minute, and that can
Mhm.
kind of help you
Yeah.
to feel that better. And then maybe next week you're doing something for like 2 minutes, then three, and then like gradually upping the time. But if you and I think kind of goes back to, some of those folks that tend to do sort of like those New Year's resolutions, and they're like, yes, I'm
Mhm.
gonna hit the gym every day. And it's
Yeah.
like, ah, let's start out like a little small. So like
Yeah.
maybe it's like 10 minutes, and then, kind of gradually increasing, because I'm sure the stats will show that, those people that sort of have those New Year's resolutions, those big grandiose New Year's resolution, by the time, February hits, guess what? They're sort of dropping off of the scene when it comes to exercise, and the gym
Yeah.
is as
Right.
quiet as ever. So knowing that research, it's like, yeah, it can kind of help to help you
Mhm.
get started. So small, slow steps, baby steps. Each step helps to move you towards your goals, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would really like to have a future interviews talk about how we work through those resistance and how to make plans properly.
Yes,
And I can totally relate to, just having short amount of time of like meditation because
yes,
when I want to do a 30-minute meditation, sometimes I get uh, terrified. So I would do like 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, I feel better, and
yes,
then I would do a 20-minute or
yes,
30-minute meditation. So in total, I do like 35 minutes. So it's a way
yeah,
to work with your body, not like forcing your body,
right,
psyche to fit into again an idea. And
yeah,
it's something I feel like it's really worth unpacking in future interviews. And I
yeah,
just really want to thank you for your time and your
yeah.
generosity to share your knowledge. For anybody who's interested in Jodi's stress relief toolkit, I will include the link in the description. And also Jodi's information. If you're looking for a therapist, a coach, I will include Jodi's information so you will know who to go to. So thank you so much, Jodi, for your time, and I hope you have a great night because it's Saturday night.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation, and we definitely need to follow up for sure.